In the last video, we saw how we could add things to an array. Now let's try pulling stuff out. Remember we said that each box in an array is named, not really named, but is named with a number. It's assigned a number. Now that's not really a name, and it's not an arbitrary number. This number is called an index value, and it points to a particular box in the array. It's what the computer and we use to keep track of what is stored where in an array. So what if we wanted to get the very first item from the array? Now, in this case, in the to-do list, that first item is Finish Collections Course. Remember how we said that array numbering always starts at 0. That is, the first box in our box analogy is always assigned the number 0. To get this value out of the first box, we need to use the index number 0. So let's add a new comment. I'll say reading from arrays. Okay, so to get something out of the array, first we need to list out or mention or write out the array that we're working with. So here, that is the to-do array. Then, without spaces, we open a square bracket. Remember, the brackets here are always square brackets. We write out the index number of the element we want to retrieve. Again, the first element in an array always has the index number 0. So first element 0, second element 1, for example. And in this case, we want the first element, so we use the number 0. And then, again, we close it off. Now you'll notice immediately in the results area that the value we retrieve is Finish Collections Course, the first string literal. Okay, so this is the syntax for getting something out of the array. And this method of retrieving is called subscripting. What is subscripting? It is when you take the name of the array that you want to work with, the variable, and immediately after that name, you put a set of square brackets and then you list the index number of the value that you want to retrieve. Now this can get confusing because these square brackets are also used to create an array. But just look at the difference here, right? Over here, we're using the square brackets to put a value inside of the array, and then we assign the entire array to some variable. Over here, we're using the square brackets along with the name of the array, and then using an index value to get the contents of the array out. Now, what if I want to assign this value? So I got something out of the array. I got the first string literal. I want to store it in a variable or a constant. And that is the same syntax as always. Remember, we assign something on the right-hand side using the assignment operator and then a name of a constant or a variable on the left-hand side. So here we'll say let first task equal to do, and then we use subscript notation and list out the index value. So now, first task is Finish Collections Course. We've basically read the value from the array and assigned it to a constant. It's important to note that we're not actually pulling the value out of the array. We're just reading it. So you know now that first task contains Finish Collections Course. So it seems like we've removed it from the array, but that's not true because if I list out array, Finish Collections Course is still in here. Okay, just to make sure we've got things down, let's try to get the third item in the array. Now, what index number do I use? I'll give you a second to try and guess. If you guess 2, that's correct. Remember, because the first item always has an index value of 0, to get the index value of any item, let's say an item at nth position, you do n minus 1 to get the index value. So let's say n represents 3 here. We want to get the third item in the array, so the index value is n minus 1 or 3 minus 1, which is 2. So we'll say let third task equal. Now again, over here, this part we're simply assigning, so don't confuse yourself. This is not related to the subscripting notation. We're just assigning something here. To actually read the array, remember we start with the name of the array, use subscripting notation, which is open square bracket, the index value, and then close square bracket. Okay, so as you can see here, third task is respond to emails. Using an index number, we can do more than just read the value. We can also use it to modify existing values and insert items into the array in a different way than appending. So first look at modifying existing values. So add a comment, modifying existing values in an array. Another way to refer to these operations that we're about to carry out is called mutating an array. So you can write that down. In a comment, we'll say mutating an array, which essentially means we're changing the array. Okay, so over here, you'll notice that we're using subscript notation to read a value. And then we assign it to a constant on the left-hand side. To modify an existing value, rather than assigning the result of a subscript to a variable or constant, we flip it around. We assign some value to the subscript notation. So let's say we wanted to change the 5th item in the array. Now remember, that is index value 4. So again, we'll start with the name of the array, open square bracket, index value 4. Now if we just left it like this, it just means we're reading it. And you'll see here it says order book online. But instead, I want to change the contents. I want to put a new string literal in there. So I can use the equal sign. And I'll say brush teeth. This is a weird to-do list. Okay. Over here, it simply says brush teeth. Now we know that before the value was order book online. But if I list out to do by simply typing it out, you'll notice that the value has been changed. We've successfully modified an existing item. Let's do this again in case you're confused. So look at the difference between the two here. To read from an array and to just simply assign the value from an array to a constant or variable, we use a subscript notation and an index value and then assign that to some constant. Over here, we're assigning a string to that position that we want to change inside the array. So if I wanted to change the first one, which over here is finish collections course, I can say to do 0 equal watch treehouse content. And again, if I list out the to-do array, you'll see that watch treehouse content is now the first value. So make sure you're aware of the difference between how you can read from an array and modify existing values.